My in-laws' house was where I went with my 5-year-old son. Then a neighbor came out and said, "No one has lived here for a long time." I immediately called my wife. "Did your parents move?" She replied, "No, they are in the same house as before." "What are you talking about?" I was confused and couldn't understand. Then my son said, "Daddy, look over there." And I trembled with fear. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. My name is Keith Hill, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had everything a man could want. A successful construction business that I'd built from nothing, a beautiful wife named Harmony, and our 5-year-old son, Tyler. We lived in a pristine suburban neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business, or at least thought they did. I'd met Harmony Porter 7 years ago at a charity auction. She was volunteering, radiant in a simple blue dress that complemented her auburn hair. I was there because my business partner Jared Rogers had dragged me along, insisting I needed to network with the upper class. Harmony wasn't upper class. She worked as a dental hygienist, but she had this grace about her that made every other woman in the room fade into the background. Our courtship was swift. Within 6 months, I'd proposed. Within a year, we were married. Tyler came along 2 years later, a perfect blend of both our features, but with my stubborn streak and her infectious laugh. At least, that's what I used to think. The construction business had been my life's work. Starting with nothing but a pickup truck and determination, I'd built Hill Construction into one of the most respected firms in the county. We specialized in custom homes for wealthy clients, and my reputation for quality and reliability had made me wealthy enough to provide Harmony with everything she wanted. She'd never had to work after Tyler was born. "I want to be there for him," she'd said, and I supported that completely. A child should have his mother present, especially in those crucial early years. I worked long hours to ensure she could have that luxury. Harmony's parents, Robert and Margaret Porter, lived about 40 minutes away in an older part of town. They were simple people. He was a retired postal worker. She'd been a secretary at the local high school. They adored Tyler and always welcomed our visits with homemade cookies and stories about Harmony's childhood. At least, that's what I thought until last weekend. The discovery started innocently enough. Harmony had been visiting her parents every Sunday for the past month, taking Tyler with her. "They're getting older, Keith," she'd explained. "I want Tyler to have memories with his grandparents." I've been working on a particularly demanding project, a mansion for Julian Douglas, a tech entrepreneur who'd moved to our area. So I've been grateful for the quiet Sundays to catch up on paperwork. Last Sunday, however, the Douglas project had wrapped up early. I decided to surprise Harmony and Tyler by joining them at the Porter's house. Maybe we could all have dinner together, I thought. I could pick up some steaks on the way and grill them in their backyard like old times. I drove through the familiar neighborhoods, past the strip mall where Harmony and I had shared our first date at a little Italian restaurant that had since closed down. The Porters lived in Maplewood Estates, a neighborhood that had seen better days, but maintained a certain dignity with its tree-lined streets and well-kept lawns. When I pulled into the Porters' driveway, something felt off immediately. The house looked empty, not just quiet, but genuinely vacant. The lawn was overgrown, newspapers were piled up by the front door, and there was a for sale sign in the yard that looked weathered, like it had been there for months. Tyler wasn't in the backyard where he usually played. Harmony's car was nowhere to be seen. Confused, I walked up to the front door and knocked. No answer. I peered through the windows and saw furniture covered in sheets, the kind of setup you see in houses that have been abandoned. That's when Mrs. Hendricks emerged from the house next door. She was an elderly woman who'd lived there for decades, always friendly during our previous visits. "Excuse me," I called out to her. "Do you know where the Porters went?" She looked at me with genuine surprise. "The Porters? Honey, no one has lived in that house for a long time. They moved out about 4 months ago. Something about needing to be closer to Robert's medical specialists in Arizona. Didn't they tell you? 4 months ago." That was right around the time Harmony had started her regular Sunday visits to see them. My head spun as I tried to process this information. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and called Harmony. "Hey, baby," she answered cheerfully. "What's up?" Tyler and I are just finishing lunch with Mom and Dad. Did your parents move? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. What? No, they're in the same house as before. What are you talking about? Are you feeling okay? I looked around the deserted property, then at Mrs. Hendricks, who was watching me with growing concern. I'm at their house right now, Harmony. It's empty. There's a for sale sign. The neighbor says they moved to Arizona 4 months ago. There was a long pause. Too long. Keith, you must be at the wrong address. We're here right now. Tyler, say hi to Daddy. I heard Tyler's voice in the background, but it sounded distant, muffled. Harmony, I'm standing in their driveway. I'm looking at the house where we've had Christmas dinner for the past 5 years. Where exactly are you? Another pause. You know what? Tyler just spilled juice all over himself. I need to clean him up. We'll talk when I get home. Okay? Love you. She hung up. I stood there for a moment, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Mrs. Hendricks approached me cautiously. Are you all right, dear? You look like you've seen a ghost. Before I could answer, a small voice called out from behind me. Daddy, Daddy, look over there. I spun around and saw Tyler running toward me from the direction of the street. But that was impossible. I just heard him in the background of Harmony's call, supposedly inside his grandparents' house. Tyler, how did you get here? He pointed excitedly toward a car parked 3 houses down, a silver sedan I didn't recognize. Mommy's in that car, with Uncle Simon. They told me to wait in the car while they looked at houses, but I saw your truck and wanted to say hi. Uncle Simon. I'd never heard Harmony mention any Uncle Simon. As I looked toward the silver sedan, I saw movement in the front seat. 2 figures sitting very close together. Too close. Even from this distance, I could see the woman's auburn hair, unmistakably Harmony's. The man next to her had his arm around her, and they were kissing. I trembled with fear, but not the kind Tyler might inspire by jumping out from behind a tree. This was the fear that comes when your entire world starts crumbling beneath your feet, when you realize that everything you believed about your life might be a carefully constructed lie. Tyler, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, go wait by Daddy's truck for a minute. He skipped away happily, oblivious to the fact that he'd just destroyed our family with a few innocent words. I stood there watching my wife of 6 years embrace another man in broad daylight, 3 houses away from where she claimed to be visiting her parents who hadn't lived there in months. The methodical mind that had built my business from nothing began clicking into gear, analyzing the situation with cold precision. Harmony wasn't just cheating. She constructed an elaborate lie that involved our son, her parents' relocation, and God knows what else. The Sunday visits, the phone calls, the stories about Tyler playing with his grandparents. All of it was fiction designed to give her time with this Simon. As I watched them together, something inside me shifted. The loving husband, the trusting partner, the man who believed in the sanctity of our marriage. That man died right there on the sidewalk of Maplewood Estates. What replaced him was something harder, colder. Something that remembered every business rival who'd tried to cheat me. Every contractor who'd attempted to cut corners on my projects. Every person who'd ever mistaken my fairness for weakness. They'd all learned that Keith Hill was not a man to be crossed. Now it was time for my wife and her Uncle Simon to learn the same lesson. Chapter 2. The investigation begins. I drove home in silence, Tyler chattering happily in the back seat about how he'd had fun looking at houses with Mommy and Uncle Simon. Every innocent word from my son was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, but I kept my voice steady as I asked casual questions. Uncle Simon seems nice. How long have you known him? A long time. He gives me candy and lets me play games on his phone. Mommy says he's a very special friend. A special friend. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What kind of houses were you looking at? Pretty ones. Uncle Simon says maybe we'll all live together someday, like a big family. The rage that coursed through me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not only was Harmony cheating, but she was involving our son in her fantasies of a future with this man. She was preparing Tyler for the destruction of our family, making him complicit in her betrayal. By the time we reached our house, I made several decisions. First, I wouldn't confront Harmony immediately. She'd had months to perfect her lies. She could explain away anything I threw at her in the heat of the moment. Second, I needed to know everything. who Simon was, how long this had been going on, what exactly they were planning. Third, and most importantly, I was going to destroy them both. Harmony arrived home an hour later, full of stories about Tyler's wonderful day with Grandma and Grandpa Porter. She described lunch in detail, invented conversations, even mentioned how Margaret had taught Tyler a new card game. The ease with which she lied was breathtaking. "Oh, and Keith," she said as she prepared dinner, "I've been thinking, maybe we should visit my parents more often. Tyler loves spending time there, and they're not getting any younger." I nodded along, playing the devoted husband while my mind cataloged every lie, every manipulation. "That's a great idea. Maybe I'll join you next Sunday." For just a moment, I saw panic flash across her face. "Oh, you don't need to do that. I know how busy you are with work. Besides, it's nice for Tyler to have special time with his grandparents. Still, I'd like to see Robert and Margaret. It's been too long." "Of course," she said, but I could see the wheels turning in her head, already formulating new lies to cover her tracks. That night, after Harmony fell asleep, I began my investigation. I started with her phone, which she'd left charging on the nightstand. She'd always been trusting about her privacy, never bothering with complex passwords. The passcode was Tyler's birthday. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Months of text messages with someone listed as Sarah from work, clearly a fake contact name. The messages were explicitly sexual, filled with promises and plans. But more than that, they revealed the depth of her deception. She wasn't just having an affair. She was systematically dismantling our marriage from the inside. Messages about how Keith suspects nothing, how boring our life together was, how she deserved better than a simple construction worker. Plans for a future that involved taking Tyler and starting fresh somewhere else. Discussions about my business, my assets, my routines, all shared with her lover like intelligence reports. Simon Thompson, that was his real name, revealed in one of the earlier messages where she'd accidentally used it instead of her code name for him. A quick search on my laptop revealed he was a real estate agent, divorced, with a reputation for aggressive sales tactics and a lifestyle that seemed to exceed his apparent income. The most damning discovery was a series of photos she'd shared with him. Pictures of our house, our financials that she'd photographed from my desk, even images of Tyler sleeping in his bed. She was providing the stranger with a complete dossier of our lives. But the message that finally pushed me over the edge was dated just 3 days ago. "Keith's been working late on the Douglas project. Perfect time to get more photos of his business records. Simon says the construction company alone should be worth over $2 million if we can prove he's hiding assets." They weren't just planning to destroy my marriage. They were planning to rob me blind in the process. I spent the rest of the night learning everything I could about Simon Thompson. 34 years old, divorced 2 years ago under messy circumstances involving suspected infidelity. His ex-wife had gotten very little in the settlement, which suggested he was skilled at hiding assets. He worked for Pinnacle Realty, one of the larger firms in the area, and drove a silver BMW sedan, the same car Tyler had seen. Most interesting was his address, a luxury apartment complex that was definitely above what a mid-level real estate agent could afford. Either he was better at his job than his reviews suggested, or he had other sources of income. By morning, I had a plan. I'd always been methodical in my business dealings. Success in construction required careful planning, attention to detail, and the ability to see several steps ahead. You had to anticipate problems before they arose, have contingencies in place, and never let emotions cloud your judgment. I would approach this betrayal the same way I'd approach a complex building project. First, reconnaissance. Gather all the information, understand all the players, identify weaknesses and opportunities. Then, careful planning. Map out every step, every possible complication, every response to their likely moves. Finally, execution. Swift, thorough, and completely devastating. Over the next 2 weeks, I hired a private investigator named Peter Wright, recommended by my lawyer Jared Rogers. Peter was a former police detective who specialized in domestic investigations, and his rates were high enough to ensure discretion. "I need to know everything," I told him in his cramped office above a pawn shop. "Every meeting, every location, every person they talked to. Financial records, background checks, anything you can legally obtain. Peter studied the photos I'd printed from Harmony's phone. This is pretty extensive betrayal, Mr. Hill. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's easier to just cut your losses and move on. They're planning to take my son and rob me of everything I've built, I said. Moving on isn't an option. He nodded slowly. Okay, but understand, once we open this door, there's no closing it. You're going to learn things that will change how you see everything. Your wife, your marriage, maybe even yourself. Good. I want to see everything clearly. The first report came back a week later, and it was devastating in its thoroughness. Peter had tracked their movements, photographed their meetings, even recorded some of their conversations from his van using a parabolic microphone. Simon Thompson wasn't just a real estate agent. He was a specialist in what he called life transitions, helping people disappear from their old lives and start fresh somewhere else. Usually, this involved women who were divorcing wealthy husbands and wanted to hide assets before the proceedings began. Harmony wasn't his first mark. In fact, she was the third woman in 2 years he'd seduced for this specific purpose. The previous two had successfully divorced their husbands, hidden significant assets, and started new lives in other states, with Simon taking a substantial cut of their gains. But this time was different. This time, Simon had gotten emotionally involved. The recorded conversations revealed that he genuinely cared for Harmony, and more troubling, he'd convinced her that taking Tyler was not just possible but necessary. The kid's attached to you now, I heard him say in one recording. Keith won't fight for custody if he thinks Tyler wants to be with us. And once we're in Florida, establishing residency, it'll be almost impossible for him to get the boy back. Florida. They were planning to move to Florida. The final piece of intelligence Peter provided was a timeline. They were planning to make their move in 3 weeks, right after I completed the Douglas project and received the final payment of $400,000. Harmony would file for divorce, claim I was abusive and an unfit father, and request emergency custody of Tyler. By the time the courts sorted everything out, they'd be long gone. As I sat in my study, surrounded by photos, recordings, and documented evidence of their betrayal, I felt a cold satisfaction settle over me. They'd made one critical mistake in their perfect plan. They'd underestimated Keith Hill. Time to show them exactly who they were dealing with. Chapter 3, The Web Titans. I began my counteroffensive with the same precision I used to build houses, from the foundation up. Over the next week, I quietly moved the bulk of our liquid assets into accounts that Harmony couldn't access, using legitimate business restructuring as cover. I'd learned from Simon's previous victims' mistakes. They'd left their finances vulnerable until it was too late. My lawyer, Jared Rogers, helped me establish a family trust with Tyler as the beneficiary and me as the sole trustee. On paper, it looked like standard estate planning. In reality, it made most of our wealth untouchable by divorce proceedings. You sure about this approach, Keith? Jared asked as we finalized the paperwork. It might be seen as vindictive. What's vindictive is plotting to kidnap my son and steal everything I've worked for, I replied. I'm just protecting what's mine. Next, I approached Julian Douglas, the tech entrepreneur whose mansion I'd just completed. Julian had been impressed with my work and had mentioned wanting to invest in local businesses. I offered him a partnership opportunity. He would buy a 40% stake in Hill Construction, providing capital for expansion while I retained control of operations. Interesting timing, Julian observed over lunch at the country club. Most contractors would wait until they needed the money. I prefer to think ahead, I said. Besides, with the right partner, we could expand into commercial development, maybe even some projects in Florida. Julian's eyes lit up. He was always looking for new ventures, and Florida's booming construction market was attractive to investors. By the end of lunch, we'd shaken hands on a deal that would make my construction company technically a joint venture. When Harmony's lawyers came looking for assets to divide, they'd find that my business was largely owned by Julian Douglas, with me as a minority partner and salaried employee. But financial protection was just the beginning. The real trap required something more personal. Through Peter Wright, I learned that Simon's weakness was his ego. He genuinely believed he was smarter than everyone around him especially the simple husbands he'd helped his previous partner's divorce. He'd grown careless, confident that his system was foolproof. I decided to use that arrogance against him. Acting on Peter's intelligence about their meeting spots, I began appearing at the same locations by coincidence. The coffee shop where they met Tuesday mornings became my new favorite place to review construction plans. The park where they walked became my new jogging route. The restaurant where they had intimate dinners became where I took clients for business meals. I never approached them directly, but I made sure Simon noticed me. A man protective of his secret affair would be paranoid about the husband showing up in too many of the same places. The psychological pressure worked better than I'd hoped. Within a week, Harmony was asking nervous questions about my new routines. "Since when do you drink coffee at Cafe Luna?" she asked one evening. "Julian Douglas recommended it. Says they have the best coffee in town for morning meetings." Perfectly innocent, perfectly plausible. "And you're jogging at Memorial Park now? I thought you hated jogging." "Doctor says I need more cardio. The park has nice trails." Again, reasonable and verifiable if she decided to check. I could see the stress building in her. She was texting more frequently, going to the bathroom to make phone calls, jumping whenever her phone buzzed. Simon was clearly pressuring her to move up their timeline, but she needed more time to gather the financial information he wanted. The pressure intensified when I made my next move. I hired Catalina Ruiz, a stunning Latina woman who worked as a freelance interior designer, to help me plan renovations for our house. Catalina was professional, talented, and most importantly, single and attractive enough to trigger Harmony's jealousy. "I want to surprise my wife with a complete redesign of our master bedroom," I told Catalina during our first consultation, making sure to schedule it for a time when Harmony would be home. Harmony's reaction was immediate and predictable. She became possessive, asking detailed questions about Catalina, insisting on being present for all our meetings, even offering to help with the design process. "She seems very friendly," Harmony said after Catalina's second visit. "She's professional and talented. Julian Douglas recommended her. She designed his entire house." The mention of Julian's name added another layer of legitimacy while reminding Harmony that I was developing relationships with wealthy, powerful people. People who could afford the best lawyers, the best investigators, the best of everything. Meanwhile, Peter Wright was documenting every meeting between Harmony and Simon, every lie she told, every step of their plan. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed something more dramatic for the finale I had in mind. That opportunity came when Peter discovered something interesting about Simon's apartment. "He's not just hiding assets," Peter reported. "He's got surveillance equipment set up in his bedroom. Professional-grade stuff. I think he's been recording his encounters with your wife." Recording them. The implications were staggering. Was Simon planning to blackmail Harmony if she got cold feet? Or was he just the type of predator who collected trophies? Either way, it gave me the perfect weapon for my revenge. I had Peter obtain copies of Simon's recordings through methods I didn't ask about and didn't want to know. What mattered was that I now had proof of their affair that was so explicit and undeniable that no court would grant Harmony custody of Tyler. More than that, I had evidence that Simon was the type of man who secretly recorded intimate encounters, something that would destroy his reputation and possibly his freedom if it became public. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. First, I wanted them to make their move, to fully commit to their betrayal, so they couldn't claim it was all a misunderstanding or temporary lapse in judgment. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after my discovery at the Porter's house, Harmony announced that she wanted to take Tyler to visit her parents for an extended weekend. "Mom's been feeling under the weather," she said, avoiding eye contact. "I think Tyler's presence would cheer her up. We'd leave Friday afternoon and come back Monday evening." This was it, their escape plan. A long weekend that would give them time to get to Florida and establish residency before I even knew they were gone. "That sounds wonderful," I said. "I'll miss you both, but family comes first." You don't mind?" "Of course not. Besides, Catalina and I are planning to do some intensive work on the bedroom renovation. It'll be easier without disruptions." I saw the flash of jealousy and suspicion in her eyes. Perfect. Let her think I was having an affair, too. It would make her feel justified in what she was about to do. That night, as she slept beside me for what she thought would be the last time, I finalized my own plans. By Monday evening, Harmony Porter Hill and Simon Thompson would discover exactly what happened to people who tried to steal from Keith Hill. They were about to learn that some houses of cards collapse spectacularly when you pull the wrong foundation stone. Chapter 4. The Hunters Become the Hunted. Friday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of autumn. I watched Harmony pack Tyler's small suitcase with the same methodical care she'd brought to our entire marriage. Except now, I knew it was all performance. Every folded shirt, every carefully chosen toy was part of her elaborate deception. Be good for Mommy and Grandma, I told Tyler, lifting him for what Harmony believed would be our final embrace. He hugged me tight, his small arms trusting and innocent. I will, Daddy. Uncle Simon says we're going to see the ocean. The ocean. So they were definitely heading to Florida, probably to a house Simon had already prepared. I smiled and kissed Tyler's forehead, knowing I'd see him again much sooner than they expected. After they left, I put the first phase of my plan into motion. I called the office and told my secretary I was taking a long weekend to work on personal projects. Then I drove to a storage unit across town where I'd been preparing for this moment. Inside the unit were supplies I'd accumulated over the past 2 weeks. Camping gear, non-perishable food, burner phones, cash, and most importantly, a detailed dossier on Simon Thompson that went far beyond what Peter Wright had provided. You see, while Peter had been excellent at surveillance and gathering evidence, my own investigation had taken a darker turn. Using resources from my construction business, subcontractors who asked few questions, suppliers who dealt in gray market materials, workers who understood the value of discretion, I'd assembled a complete picture of Simon's operation. Simon Thompson wasn't just a real estate agent who helped women hide assets. He was a predator who specifically targeted married women with wealthy husbands and young children. His method was always the same. Seduce the wife, convince her she deserved better, help her plan the escape, then take a substantial cut of everything she stole from her husband. But there was something else. Something Peter's investigation had missed because he'd focused on the legal aspects of Simon's crimes. Simon had a history of violence. His first ex-wife, Naomi Foster, had filed a police report alleging domestic abuse, but had withdrawn it when Simon agreed to a quick, quiet divorce. His second victim, Allison Briggs, had disappeared entirely after their affair ended badly. Officially, she'd moved to Europe to start fresh, but I'd found evidence suggesting otherwise. Most damning was what I discovered about his third victim, Chloe Carter. She died in what was ruled an accidental drowning at a beach house in Florida, just 3 months after her divorce was finalized and she'd received her settlement. Simon had been conveniently out of town when it happened, but he'd inherited everything as her boyfriend and designated beneficiary. Simon Thompson wasn't just a con artist. He was a serial killer who used romance and legal manipulation to destroy families and eliminate witnesses. And he had my wife and son. By Friday evening, they were in a beach house outside Tampa, based on a GPS tracker I'd hidden in Tyler's backpack. I knew this because I was watching from a rental car parked 2 blocks away. Getting to Florida had required calling in favors and cutting some corners. Julian Douglas owned a small jet that he used for business travel, and when I'd explained that I needed to handle an urgent family emergency in Florida, he'd offered to let me use it. I'd told him just enough of the truth, that Harmony was cheating and planning to take Tyler, to earn his sympathy and support. Take the jet, he'd said. And Keith, whatever you need to do to protect your son, you have my full backing. Now, as I watched the beach house where my family was supposed to be starting their new life, I felt the cold satisfaction of a plan coming together perfectly. They thought they were safe. They thought they'd escaped cleanly, that I wouldn't discover their absence until Monday night. They thought I was home, probably drinking myself into depression while Catalina Ruiz consoled me. Instead, I was one step ahead, armed with information they couldn't imagine I possessed, ready to end their fairy tale in the most brutal way possible. I waited until 2 a.m. when the house was dark and silent. Then I made my move. The beach house was typical of Simon's operation, isolated, rented under a false name, with multiple exit routes and few neighbors. It was perfect for privacy, which meant it was equally perfect for what I had planned. I learned a lot of skills building houses from the ground up. Lock picking, security systems, structural engineering. They were all just tools of the trade. Getting into the house was easier than breaking into most of the construction sites I'd worked on. I found Tyler first, asleep in a small bedroom decorated with seashells and starfish. He looked peaceful, completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. I carefully lifted him from the bed, grateful that he was a deep sleeper, and carried him to my rental car. Only when he was safely secured in the back seat did I return to the house to deal with Harmony and Simon. They were in the master bedroom, and from the scattered clothes and champagne bottles, it was clear they'd been celebrating their successful escape. Simon lay on his back, snoring softly, one arm draped possessively over my wife. I stood in the doorway for a moment, studying them. 7 years of marriage, and I'd never seen Harmony look as relaxed as she did in the arms of this predator. Even in sleep, she seemed more alive, more vibrant than she'd ever been with me. That observation should have hurt. Instead, it confirmed that I was doing the right thing. I woke Simon first, pressing the barrel of a gun, untraceable, purchased through construction industry contacts, against his temple. "Good morning, Simon," I whispered. "Time to wake up." His eyes snapped open, immediately alert. I had to give him credit. He was experienced enough to recognize danger when it was pressed against his skull. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm Keith Hill, Harmony's husband, Tyler's father, the man whose life you've been planning to destroy." Harmony stirred at the sound of our voices, and when she saw me standing over them with a gun, she screamed. "Keith, oh my God, what are you doing here? How did you find us?" "Shut up," I said calmly. "Both of you get dressed." Slowly, no sudden movements. As they fumbled for their clothes, I explained how I discovered their plan, how I'd been watching them for weeks, how I knew everything about Simon's previous victims. "You made one mistake," I told Simon as he pulled on his pants. "You assumed I was just another stupid husband who'd never see it coming. But I built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. I don't miss details, and I don't let people steal from me." "Look, Keith," Simon said, his voice taking on the smooth, persuasive tone he probably used to sell houses, "this doesn't have to get violent. We can work something out. Harmony and we fell in love. It wasn't planned. These things happen." I laughed, a sound that made both of them flinch. "Simon, I know about Naomi Foster. I know about Allison Briggs. I know about Chloe Carter. You don't fall in love with your victims. You hunt them. And when you're done using them, you dispose of them." The color drained from Simon's face. Harmony looked confused, glancing between us. "Keith, what are you talking about? Who are these women?" "Tell her, Simon. Tell her about your previous wives and girlfriends. Tell her what happened to them after they outlived their usefulness." Simon's shoulders sagged as he realized the depth of my knowledge. "You don't understand the whole situation." "I understand enough. You're a serial killer who uses romance and financial manipulation to destroy families. But this time you picked the wrong family." Harmony was crying now, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. "Keith, please. Tyler needs his mother. Whatever Simon has done, I didn't know about it. I thought I loved him." "You thought wrong," I said. "And Tyler is fine. He's safe in my car, still asleep. By tomorrow, he'll be back home where he belongs." "What are you going to do to us?" Simon asked. I smiled, and from their expressions, I could tell it wasn't a pleasant sight. "That depends on how cooperative you are with my plan." Chapter 5, The Reckoning. What happened next would forever change how I saw myself, but I felt no hesitation in that beach house bedroom. These two had planned to destroy my life, steal my son, and in Simon's case, eventually eliminate the only witness to his crimes, my wife. "Here's what's going to happen," I told them, keeping the gun trained on Simon while they finished dressing. "We're going to take a little trip. There's an abandoned construction site about an hour from here. A project that was started and then abandoned when the developer ran out of money. Very isolated. Very private." "Keith, please," Harmony sobbed. "I know I made mistakes, but this isn't you. You're not a killer." "You're right," I said. "I'm not a killer. I'm a builder. And sometimes, before you can build something new, you have to tear down what's rotten." The drive to the construction site was conducted in complete silence. Simon drove his BMW with Harmony in the passenger seat, while I followed in my rental car with Tyler still sleeping peacefully in the back. Every few minutes, I'd check the rearview mirror to make sure my son was okay, reminding myself why this was necessary. The construction site was perfect for my purposes, a half-built luxury resort that had been abandoned when the investors were arrested for fraud. The concrete foundations had been poured, the basic framework erected, but no walls or roof had been installed. It was essentially a concrete maze in the middle of nowhere, invisible from any road. I discovered it during my reconnaissance of the area, and it had given me the perfect idea for Simon and Harmony's fate. Once we arrived, I marched them to the center of the unfinished structure, where a large concrete mixer sat abandoned among piles of construction materials. Do you know what happens to concrete when it sets around something? I asked conversationally. Neither of them answered. It creates a perfect seal, airtight, permanent. In ancient Rome, they used to execute traitors by encasing them in concrete while it was still wet. The victims would be alive when the process started, but not for long. "You're insane," Simon said, but his voice shook with fear. "No, I'm thorough. See, I could just shoot you both and dump your bodies in the ocean. But that's messy, unpredictable. Bodies wash up. Evidence gets found. This way, you simply disappear. Another tragic case of people who vanished without a trace." I gestured to the concrete mixer. "This still has a full load of concrete from when the workers abandoned the site. All I have to do is add water, and it'll be ready to pour." Harmony was hyperventilating now. "Keith, I'll do anything. I'll sign papers giving up all rights to Tyler. I'll disappear forever. Just please don't kill me." "It's too late for bargains," I said. "You made your choice when you decided to steal my son and my life." But as I spoke, I noticed something in Simon's posture. The fear was still there, but underneath it was calculation. He was looking for an opening, a chance to turn the tables. "You know what your problem is, Keith?" Simon said suddenly. "You're too emotional, too attached. That's why you'll never be truly successful." "Is that so?" "Men like you build things, you accumulate wealth, but you never understand power. Real power isn't about money or muscles or even guns. It's about information, about having something your enemies need." He was stalling, trying to keep me talking while he figured out his next move. I decided to let him try. "And what could you possibly have that I need?" Simon smiled, and for the first time since I'd held the gun to his head, he looked confident. "Tyler isn't your son." The words hit me like a physical blow. Harmony's gasp told me she was as shocked as I was. "What?" "Harmony and I have been together for over 2 years, not just a few months like you think." "That little boy in your car? He's mine. I've been waiting for the right time to tell you, but I figured saving our lives might be a good occasion." I looked at Harmony, who was shaking her head frantically. "That's not true. Keith, he's lying. Tyler is your son." But Simon was pulling out his phone, swiping to a photo gallery. "DNA test results," he said, showing me the screen. "Had them done 6 months ago when I started planning our escape. Tyler Hill is actually Tyler Thompson. He's my boy, Keith. You've been raising another man's child for 5 years." The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not just at the betrayal, but the theft of 5 years of fatherhood, 5 years of believing I was building something for my son's future. But then I looked closer at the phone screen, and I started laughing. "These are very convincing, Simon. Professional quality forgeries. You must have paid a lot for them. They're not fake." "Yes, they are. Because I had Tyler tested myself 3 years ago when Harmony had that brief scare about a possible genetic condition. The test confirmed that Tyler is definitely my biological son. But more importantly, these photos on your phone show a date from 6 months ago, but they reference lab procedures that weren't available until 2 months ago. You're using an updated form to fake older results." Simon's face went white as he realized his bluff had failed. "You see, this is the difference between us," I continued. "You're clever, but you're not careful. You make mistakes because you underestimate people. I don't make those kinds of errors." "Keith," Harmony said desperately, "if Tyler really is your son, then you have to think about what's best for him. He needs his mother. He needs He needs to grow up knowing that actions have consequences. I interrupted. That betrayal has a price. That his father is not a man to be crossed. I moved toward the concrete mixer, and both of them stepped backward. But here's the thing, I said, stopping just short of the machine. I lied about the concrete. They looked confused. Oh, I'm definitely going to kill you both. But not with concrete. That was just to scare you, to make you understand the gravity of your situation. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a second phone, one of the burner phones I'd purchased. What I'm actually going to do is much simpler and much more poetic. I showed them the screen, which displayed a video recording of their entire conversation from the past 20 minutes. You see, Simon, you just confessed to being a serial killer on camera. You admitted to murdering your previous victims. And Harmony, you just admitted to willingly participating in a plan to kidnap my son and steal my assets. But you forced us to say those things at gunpoint. Did I? Let me check the recording. I rewound the video and played it back. No, I don't hear any threats. I hear a confession from a serial killer and his accomplice. Of course, the full recording will show the context, but edited properly. The implications were sinking in. You're not going to kill us, Harmony said slowly. You're going to destroy us. Now you're starting to understand. Simon, by Monday morning, copies of this recording will be delivered to the FBI, the Florida State Police, and the families of your previous victims. Your face will be on every news channel in the country. Your name will be synonymous with the worst kind of predator. I turned to Harmony. And you, my dear wife, will be known as the woman who helped a serial killer try to kidnap a child. The woman who betrayed her family for a murderer. Tyler will grow up knowing exactly what kind of person his mother really was. You bastard, Simon snarled, lunging toward me. I sidestepped easily and brought the gun down on the back of his head. He collapsed to the concrete, unconscious but alive. That's for putting your hands on my son, I said. Harmony was crying uncontrollably now. Keith, please. We can work this out. I'll do anything. You're right. You will do anything I tell you to. Because if you don't, this recording goes public and Tyler learns that his mother is a criminal who tried to help a killer steal him away from his father. I explained her new reality as clinically as I'd explain a construction contract. She would divorce me quietly, taking only what I chose to give her. She would relinquish all parental rights to Tyler without contest. She would disappear from our lives completely, moving far away and never attempting to contact our son. In exchange, I would not release the recording. I would not press kidnapping charges. I would allow her to maintain some shred of dignity by claiming the divorce was mutual. But if you ever try to contact Tyler, if you ever try to interfere in his life, if you ever try to claim you were coerced or threatened, the recording goes public and you spend the rest of your life in prison. When Simon regained consciousness, I gave him a similar offer. He could disappear, change his name, start over somewhere far away. Or he could face the consequences of his recorded confession. You can't prove any of those other deaths were murder, he said weakly. I don't have to. The confession combined with the evidence I've already gathered will be enough to destroy your life. Every cold case involving a missing woman will be reopened with your name attached. Every family you've destroyed will have a target for their rage. You'll never be safe. As dawn broke over the abandoned construction site, I walked away from the two people who had tried to destroy everything I'd built. They were alive, but their lives as they knew them were over. Tyler was still sleeping peacefully in my car when I drove away. Chapter 6, New Foundations. The flight back to our home state was quiet. Tyler had woken up confused about his surroundings, but I'd explained that Mommy had gotten sick and had to stay in Florida for a while. He accepted this with the trusting simplicity of a 5-year-old, more interested in the airplane than in asking difficult questions. By Sunday evening, we were back in our house. Tyler played with his toys while I sat in my study, planning the next phase of my life. The phone calls would start Monday morning. First my lawyer, then to Peter Wright to tie up loose ends, then to Julie and Douglas to discuss our business partnership. But tonight was for father and son. Daddy, Tyler said as I tucked him into bed. When is Mommy coming home? Mommy isn't coming home, buddy. She decided she wanted to live somewhere else, somewhere far away. Did I do something wrong? The question broke my heart. I knelt beside his bed and looked into his innocent eyes, eyes that held my features, my genetics, my future. No, Tyler, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, and other grown-ups have to make hard choices to fix things. But I want you to remember something very important. What? Your daddy will never leave you. Your daddy will always protect you. And your daddy will always make sure you have everything you need to grow up strong and good. He hugged me tight, and I felt the final pieces of Keith Hill the husband die away, replaced completely by Keith Hill the father. Monday morning brought the calls I'd been expecting. Harmony's panicked voice on one of my burner phones, begging me to reconsider. Simon's desperate attempts to negotiate. Both of them had apparently spent the weekend researching just how much evidence I had against them, and the reality of their situation was sinking in. The deal stands, I told each of them. Disappear quietly or face the consequences publicly. By Wednesday, the divorce papers were filed. Harmony cited irreconcilable differences and requested nothing. No alimony, no property division, no custody. The court date was set for the following month, a mere formality to finalize what was already decided. Peter Wright delivered the final pieces of evidence I needed to ensure my protection. Bank records showing that Harmony had been transferring small amounts of money to accounts under false names. Email records of her communications with Simon about their plans. Most importantly, documentation of Simon's real identity and criminal history that would make any future claims of coercion laughable. You've got enough here to put them both away for years, Peter observed. Are you sure you want to let them walk? Prison would be too easy, I said. This way, they have to live with what they've become. They have to start over with nothing, always looking over their shoulders, always knowing that I could destroy them completely if I chose to. The construction business flourished under my partnership with Julian Douglas. With his capital and connections, we expanded into commercial development, then into real estate investment. Within 6 months, Hill Douglas Development was bidding on projects across 3 states. More importantly, the business structure Julian and I had created made my assets virtually untouchable by any future legal challenges. Even if Harmony or Simon tried to claim they'd been coerced, they would find that the man they tried to rob was no longer the owner of the wealth they coveted. Tyler adjusted to life without his mother with remarkable resilience. I hired Riley Floyd, a woman in her 50s who'd raised 4 children of her own, to help with childcare and household management. She was kind but firm, nurturing but not permissive, exactly what Tyler needed. Where did Mommy go? He asked one evening about 3 weeks after our return. She went to live in a place where she thought she'd be happier, I said. But sometimes, when people think they want something different, they make mistakes they can't fix. Will I see her again? I don't know, buddy. But remember what I told you, Daddy will always be here, and Daddy will always take care of you. He seemed satisfied with that answer. The months that followed were the most peaceful of my adult life. Without the constant stress of Harmony's deception, without the background noise of a failing marriage, I could focus entirely on the 2 things that mattered, raising my son and building our future. Tyler thrived. His grades in kindergarten were excellent, his behavior exemplary. He made friends easily and showed an early aptitude for building things, already asking questions about how houses were constructed, how machines worked, how to make things stronger and better. He's got your mind, Riley observed one evening as we watched Tyler construct an elaborate fort out of building blocks. Methodical, careful. He thinks 3 steps ahead. Good, I said. He'll need those qualities in this world. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a call from Peter Wright. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Simon Thompson was found dead in a motel outside Las Vegas. Apparent suicide. Left a note confessing to the murders of 3 women. I felt no satisfaction at the news, but no sorrow either. Simon had chosen his path long before he encountered my family. His death was simply the logical conclusion of a life built on predation and violence. What about the note? I asked. Nothing about you or your wife. Just the 3 previous victims. Looks like he couldn't live with what he'd done. Or he couldn't live with the constant fear of exposure. The knowledge that his past was always one phone call away from catching up with him. Either way, Simon Thompson was no longer my problem. I never learned what happened to Harmony. She disappeared as completely as I demanded, leaving no forwarding address, no contact information, no trace of her new life. Sometimes I wondered if she'd found peace, if she'd learned to live with her choices. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all. The woman I'd married had been a creation, a performance designed to extract everything of value from my life. The real Harmony had been revealed in those text messages, those recorded conversations, those calculated betrayals. I felt no more obligation to that person than I would to any other criminal who'd try to rob me. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. 2 years after Harmony's disappearance, I had built something better than what I'd lost. Hill Douglas Development was approaching a valuation of $50 million, with projects in 7 states and a reputation that attracted the most prestigious clients. Tyler was thriving in 2nd grade, showing remarkable intelligence and emotional stability for a child who'd lost his mother under traumatic circumstances. But the past has a way of reasserting itself when you least expect it. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was helping Tyler with a science project about simple machines when my personal phone rang. The number was blocked, but I answered anyway. "Hello, Keith." Harmony's voice hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't heard it in 2 years, but I recognized it immediately. "Tyler, go to your room and work on your project," I said calmly. "Daddy needs to take this call." Once my son was out of earshot, I walked into my study and closed the door. "You're violating our agreement," I said. "Our agreement is void," Harmony replied. "Simon is dead, which means I don't have to worry about his crimes being discovered. And I've spent the last 2 years building a new life, a clean life. I want my son back." "Your son? You gave up all parental rights. You disappeared without a word. Tyler thinks you're dead." "I was coerced. You threatened to kill me." I laughed, the same cold sound that had terrified her in that Florida beach house. "Is that the story you're going with?" "Because I still have the recording of our conversation that night. The one where you confessed to planning to kidnap Tyler and steal my assets. Would you like me to refresh your memory?" There was a long pause. "Things have changed, Keith. I remarried. My new husband is well-connected, powerful. He has resources that could make your life very difficult." "And who is this powerful new husband?" "Richard Williams. Maybe you've heard of him." I had. Richard Williams was a federal prosecutor, ambitious and politically connected, known for his high-profile corruption cases. If Harmony had convinced him that she was the victim of an abusive ex-husband who'd stolen her child, he could indeed make my life difficult. "How much does your new husband know about your past?" I asked. "He knows everything that matters. He knows you threatened me, forced me to sign away my rights to my son, and made me disappear to protect myself. Does he know about Simon? About your plan to flee to Florida? About the fact that you were committing adultery for over a year?" Another pause, shorter this time. "Those are lies you made me say at gunpoint." "Harmony, you're making a mistake. You had a clean exit. You could have started over anywhere, been anyone you wanted to be. Why come back now?" "Because I never stopped thinking about Tyler. Because I realized that no matter what I'd done, no matter what mistakes I'd made, I'm still his mother. And because Richard has shown me that there are ways to fight back against bullies like you." The line went dead. I sat in my study for a long time, considering my options. Harmony had made a calculated move, using her new husband's position to try to reclaim what she'd lost. But she'd also made several critical errors in judgment. First, she'd assumed that my evidence against her had lost its power with Simon's death. Second, she'd assumed that Richard Williams would remain supportive once he learned the full truth about his new wife. Third, she'd assumed that 2 years had made me soft, that success and stability had blunted my edge. She was wrong on all counts. I called Peter Wright first. "I need everything you can get on Richard Williams. Financial records, political connections, career history, personal weaknesses. And I need it fast." "How fast?" 24 hours. Spare no expense." Next, I called Julian Douglas. "Julian, I need a favor. A big one." "Name it." "I may need character references, potentially legal support, possibly even political pressure. My ex-wife is trying to use her new husband's position as a federal prosecutor to challenge our custody arrangement. Consider it done. Anyone who tries to hurt your family hurts mine." What do you need me to do? The network I'd built over the past 2 years was about to prove its value. Julian had connections to senators, governors, federal judges. My construction projects had created relationships with police chiefs, district attorneys, and influential businessmen across multiple states. The quiet, methodical approach I'd taken to rebuilding my life had given me resources that Harmony couldn't imagine. But the real key to handling this threat was understanding Richard Williams himself. Peter's report arrived 18 hours later, and it was fascinating reading. Richard Williams was indeed powerful and ambitious, but he was also incredibly image-conscious. His political aspirations depended on maintaining a reputation for integrity and family values. He'd built his career on prosecuting corrupt officials and protecting innocent victims. More importantly, he'd been married before to a woman named Bryn Reed who divorced him 5 years ago, citing emotional abuse and controlling behavior. The divorce records were sealed, but Peter had found evidence suggesting that Williams had used his position to intimidate his ex-wife into accepting an unfavorable settlement. This was a man who had a pattern of using his power to control women, which meant he was exactly the type of person who would be attracted to Harmony's victim narrative. But it also meant he was exactly the type of person who would turn vicious if he discovered he'd been manipulated. I spent that evening crafting my response, not a direct confrontation. That would play into Harmony's hands, making me look like the aggressive ex-husband she was portraying. Instead, I would give Richard Williams the information he needed to see his new wife clearly and let him draw his own conclusions. The package I sent to Williams contained no threatening letters, no demands, no emotional appeals. Just facts. Copies of Harmony's text messages with Simon. Bank records showing the money transfers. Photos of them together in Florida. Most importantly, the recording of our conversation that night at the construction site, carefully edited to remove any context that might suggest coercion. I included a simple cover letter. Mr. Williams, I believe you have a right to know who you married. I also believe that, as a prosecutor, you have an obligation to recognize evidence when you see it. The woman you're trying to help is not the victim she's portrayed herself to be. She's a calculating predator who destroyed one family and is now attempting to destroy another. I hope you'll consider these facts before proceeding with any legal action. I sent the package to his home address on a Saturday, ensuring that Harmony would be present when he received it. Monday morning, my phone rang. Keith Hill, this is Richard Williams. I think we need to talk. His voice was different from what I'd expected. Tired, defeated. I'd be happy to discuss the situation, I said. Not over the phone. Can you meet me for lunch today? We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where federal prosecutors conduct unofficial business. Williams looked older than his photos, his hair graying prematurely, his eyes holding the cynical weariness of a man who'd seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. I've been married to Harmony for 8 months, he said without preamble. In that time, she's told me a dozen different versions of what happened with you. Each one painted her as more of a victim, you as more of a monster. And now I've seen evidence that suggests she's a pathological liar who manipulated me the same way she manipulated you. He paused, staring into his coffee. The woman I married doesn't exist, does she? No, she doesn't. The recording you sent me, that's really her confessing to adultery and planning to kidnap your son? That's really her, the woman you married. Williams was quiet for a long moment. I've spent my career putting criminals in prison. I pride myself on being able to read people, to see through deception. How'd I miss this? Because she's very good at what she does. She targets successful men who are vulnerable for one reason or another. Your divorce, my workaholic tendencies, she finds the weakness and exploits it. What do you want from me, Hill? I want you to stop enabling her. I want you to tell her that any attempt to challenge my custody of Tyler will result in all of this evidence becoming public. I want her to disappear again, permanently this time. And if I don't, I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then you'll find yourself married to a woman who's about to become the subject of a very public criminal investigation. Your career, your reputation, your political future, all of it will be destroyed by association. Williams nodded slowly. She told me you were a simple construction worker. Said you weren't smart enough to fight back effectively. Did she? Well, as you can see, she was wrong about that too. We finished lunch in relative silence. When Williams stood to leave, he paused at the table. For what it's worth, Hill, I think you're a better man than I am. If someone had done to me what she did to you, I don't think I would have been as restrained. I have a son to think about. That changes your priorities. 2 days later, I received a call from Harmony's lawyer, not Williams, but a private attorney she'd hired independently. Mr. Hill, my client would like to discuss a settlement regarding any future contact with her son. I'm listening. She's prepared to relinquish any claims to visitation or custody in perpetuity in exchange for your agreement, not to pursue criminal charges related to her past actions. Criminal charges? I don't know what you mean. Sir, my client believes you have evidence that could be used to prosecute her for attempted kidnapping and fraud. Your client is paranoid, but I'm willing to formalize our previous agreement. Complete severance of all parental rights, no future contact with my son, no claims against my assets. In exchange, I continue to maintain my privacy regarding our divorce. That's acceptable. The papers were signed that week. This time, the agreement was ironclad, crafted by the best family law attorneys money could buy, with penalties severe enough to deter any future challenges. Harmony Williams, she'd taken her new husband's name, disappeared from our lives as completely as she had 2 years earlier. But this time, I knew she wouldn't be back. Richard Williams resigned from his position 3 months later, citing personal reasons. Word around legal circles was that his marriage had ended badly, and he was moving to private practice in another state. I felt no sympathy for him. He'd chosen to involve himself in my family's affairs without understanding the full situation. Like everyone else who'd underestimated Keith Hill, he'd learned that actions have consequences. Chapter 8. Building Something New. Life settled into a rhythm that I found deeply satisfying. Tyler was now 8 years old, excelling in school and showing an early interest in engineering and construction. Our weekend projects had evolved from simple building blocks to actual construction work. I taught him to use basic tools safely, and he helped me build a tree house in our backyard that was architecturally sound enough to serve as a model for the luxury tree houses we were starting to build for wealthy clients. Hill Douglas Development had become one of the most respected firms in the region. Our projects were featured in architectural magazines, and we'd attracted attention from international investors. Julian and I had found a perfect partnership. His vision and capital combined with my practical expertise and meticulous execution. But the real measure of my success was Tyler himself. Dad, he said one evening as we reviewed the blueprints for a new office complex. Why did Mom really leave? He was old enough now to ask more sophisticated questions, to understand that the simple explanations I'd given him as a 5-year-old weren't the complete truth. I set down my pencil and looked at my son, really looked at him. He had my eyes, my determined jaw, but there was something else there too. A kindness that I hoped he'd inherited from someone better than either of his biological parents. Your mother made some choices that hurt our family, I said carefully. She forgot that being part of a family means putting the family first, ahead of your own wants. Was she a bad person? It was a fair question, and one I'd been dreading. I don't think people are simply good or bad, Tyler. I think people make good choices and bad choices. Your mother made some very bad choices, choices that would have hurt you if I hadn't stopped them. But that doesn't mean she was evil, just selfish. Do you miss her? I miss the person I thought she was. But that person wasn't real. The real your mother was someone I couldn't trust to protect you or our family. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. So you protected us instead. Yes, and I always will. That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Tyler began to understand that his family consisted of just the two of us, and that this wasn't a tragedy, but simply our reality. More importantly, he began to understand that his father was someone who could be counted on, who would face any threat to protect what mattered. The business continued to grow. We expanded into green construction, developing eco-friendly building techniques that attracted environmentally conscious clients. Julian's connections had opened doors to government contracts, and we were now building federal facilities that required the highest security clearances. The background investigations for these contracts have been extensive, examining every aspect of my life, including my divorce from Harmony. The investigators found nothing problematic. A man whose wife had abandoned him and their child, who'd fought to maintain custody and succeeded. If anything, the investigators seemed impressed by my dedication to single parenthood while building a successful business. One evening, as Tyler and I worked on a science fair project, a scale model of a suspension bridge, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. Keith Hill. Mr. Hill, this is Detective Zachary Cox with the Miami-Dade Police Department. I'm calling about a woman named Harmony Williams, who I understand used to be your wife. My blood chilled. What about her? She was found dead 3 days ago in her apartment. Apparent suicide. She left a note mentioning you and your son, and we're trying to tie up some loose ends. I set down my tools and walked into another room away from Tyler. What do the notes say? Mostly just regrets about leaving her son, wishes that things had been different. She mentioned that you've been a good father and that Tyler was lucky to have you. There's nothing that suggests any wrongdoing on your part. We're just calling everyone mentioned in the note to see if they had any recent contact with her. I haven't spoken to Harmony in over 2 years. She relinquished all parental rights and moved away. I didn't even know she was living in Miami. That matches what we found. Her neighbors said she kept to herself, seemed depressed. Her husband, ex-husband now, I guess, said she'd been struggling since their divorce. After Detective Cox hung up, I sat in my study for a long time, processing the information. Harmony was dead. The woman who'd tried to destroy my life, who'd planned to steal my son, who'd forced me to become someone harder and more ruthless than I'd ever intended to be. She was gone. I felt no satisfaction, no vindication, no sense of justice served. Just a profound emptiness, as if a chapter of my life had been closed without proper resolution. The death also raised practical concerns. Would there be an investigation into our divorce? Would someone dig into the circumstances that had led to Harmony's complete disappearance from Tyler's life? Would the carefully constructed narrative I'd built around her abandonment hold up under scrutiny? Over the next few weeks, I waited for those concerns to materialize. But they never did. Detective Cox never called back. No other investigators contacted me. Harmony's death was ruled a suicide. Her affairs were settled by a court-appointed administrator, and her name faded from the public record as completely as she'd faded from our lives. Tyler never learned about his mother's death. At 8 years old, he'd moved beyond asking about her, accepting that his family was just him and his father and the life we'd built together. There seemed no point in reopening old wounds or complicating his understanding of his origins. Instead, I focused on the future we were building. The business reached a new milestone when Julian and I were selected to design and build a new federal courthouse, a project worth over $100 million and guaranteed to cement our reputation as one of the premier construction firms in the country. Tyler started showing real aptitude for mathematics and engineering, asking increasingly sophisticated questions about structural engineering and material science. I began teaching him the fundamentals of construction management, not because I expected him to follow in my footsteps, but because I wanted him to understand the value of building something lasting and worthwhile. "Why do you always make everything so strong?" he asked one day as we toured one of our construction sites. He'd noticed that our buildings consistently exceeded code requirements for structural integrity. "Because when you build something, you're responsible for everyone who'll ever use it," I said. "If I cut corners to save money or time, and someone gets hurt because the building fails, that's on me. So I build everything to last, to protect the people inside." "Is that why you protected me from Mom? Because she might have hurt me?" The question caught me off guard. Tyler's understanding of the situation had evolved as he'd grown older, and his questions had become more perceptive. "Yes, that's exactly why." "Good," he said simply. "I'm glad you did." Looking at my son that day, standing confidently on a construction site in his hard hat and safety glasses, asking intelligent questions and drawing connections between our work and our family, I realized I'd succeeded in ways that went far beyond business success or personal revenge. I'd built something better than what I'd lost. I'd raised a son who understood loyalty, responsibility, and the importance of protecting what mattered. I'd created a life based on substance rather than deception, on earned respect rather than manipulated emotions. Harmony had tried to steal my future. Instead, she'd forced me to build a better one. Chapter 9, Legacy. 5 years had passed since Harmony's death, and Tyler was now 13, a teenager who bore an unmistakable resemblance to me, but possessed a warmth and openness that I hoped meant he'd learned from my experiences without inheriting my harder edges. Hill Douglas Development had become more than a regional success story. We were now a national firm with offices in 12 states, specializing in high-security government facilities and luxury private developments. The business that had started as my way of providing for my family had evolved into a legacy that would provide for Tyler's children and their children after them. But the real measure of what I'd built wasn't financial. "Dad, I've been thinking about Mom," Tyler said one evening as we reviewed his high school course selections. He was planning to take advanced mathematics and physics, already showing interest in following some version of my path. This wasn't the first time he'd brought up Harmony in recent years. As Tyler had matured, he'd naturally become curious about the parent he'd never really known. "What about her?" "I've been doing some research online. I found some old photos from when you two were married, some articles about the business from back then. You look different. Happier, maybe." I studied my son's face, tried to read what he was really asking. I was different then. Younger. More trusting. I thought I understood how the world worked. "Do you regret that?" Being more trusting. It was a sophisticated question from a 13-year-old, but Tyler had always been mature for his age. "I regret that your mother took advantage of that trust. But I don't regret having it in the first place. Trust is important, Tyler, but so is being careful about who deserves it. Would you trust someone like that again? If you met someone new?" The question surprised me. Tyler had never asked about my dating life, had never suggested that our family needed anything more than what we had. "Are you asking if I'm planning to remarry?" "I'm asking if what Mom did changed you so much that you'll never be able to trust anyone again." I set down the course catalog and really looked at my son. When had he become wise enough to ask such penetrating questions? "Your mother taught me that people can lie very convincingly about who they are and what they want. But you've taught me that some people are exactly who they appear to be. Honest, loyal, caring. The trick is learning to tell the difference." "How do you do that?" "Time. Observation. You watch how people behave when they think no one is looking. You see how they treat people who can't do anything for them. You pay attention to whether their actions match their words." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Is that why you test people?" "What do you mean?" "I've noticed that whenever you hire someone new, or whenever we meet someone you might want to work with, you create little situations to see how they'll react. Like when you accidentally left that envelope of cash on your desk when the new accountant was in your office alone. Or when you told Mr. Patterson that fake story about the permit delays to see if he'd try to bribe his way around them." I was impressed. Tyler had been observing my methods without my realizing it. "Those aren't tests, exactly. They're just prudent verification of character." "Same thing," Tyler said with a grin. "And it works, doesn't it? The accountant proved he was honest when he immediately told you about the money. Mr. Patterson proved he was corrupt when he offered you a bribe. You're very observant. I learned from watching you. You taught me that actions reveal character better than words." As Tyler grew older, these conversations became more frequent. He understood, without my having to explain explicitly, that our family had been forged in crisis, that the comfortable life we now enjoyed had been built on the ruins of betrayal and deception. More importantly, he understood that strength came not from avoiding hardship, but from facing it directly and refusing to be broken by it. The business continued to thrive, but I found myself thinking more about legacy, not just financial, but the values and lessons I was passing to my son. When Tyler turned 16, I made him a full partner in a subsidiary company I created, Hill Construction Training, which provided apprenticeship programs for young people interested in construction trades. It was his first real taste of business responsibility, and he approached it with the same methodical care I'd taught him to apply to everything else. "Why did you start this program?" he asked after his first board meeting. "Because not everyone gets the chances we've had. Some people grow up in families where betrayal and failure are the norm. I wanted to give them the opportunity to build something better. Like you did. Like we did. This is your legacy too, Tyler. Someday you'll have to decide what kind of man you want to be, what kind of family you want to build, what kind of impact you want to have on the world. I want to be like you. The simple statement hit me harder than I'd expected. No, I said, you should be better than me. You should take the good things I've taught you and leave behind the harder parts. You should learn from my experiences without having to live through the same betrayals. But what if I do? What if someone tries to hurt our family the way Mom did? I looked at my son, no longer a boy, but not yet a man, standing at the threshold of adulthood with questions that would shape the rest of his life. Then you'll handle it. But hopefully, you'll handle it better than I did. With more wisdom, less anger. More mercy, less vengeance. Don't you think you handled it the right way? It was a question I'd been asking myself for years. I handled it effectively. I protected you, preserved our assets, built a better life for both of us. But there were costs, things I had to do, lines I had to cross, parts of myself I had to harden. I don't regret those choices because they were necessary to protect you. But I hope you never have to make similar choices. Tyler was quiet for a moment. If you had to do it again, would you do anything differently? I would have seen the signs sooner. I would have been less trusting initially, more careful about who I let into our lives. Prevention is always better than response. Is that why you investigate everyone who gets close to us? I had to smile at his perceptiveness. Is it that obvious? To me, yes. But I think it's smart. Trust but verify, right? Right. As Tyler's 18th birthday approached, I began transitioning more responsibility to him. He'd proven himself capable of handling complex projects, managing teams of workers, and making the kind of difficult decisions that separated successful leaders from mere managers. But more than that, he'd proven himself to be the kind of man I'd hoped to raise. Strong but not cruel, careful but not paranoid, protective but not vindictive. On the night before his high school graduation, we sat on the deck behind our house, looking out at the city lights and talking about his plans for college and beyond. I've been accepted to MIT's engineering program, he said, but I've also been thinking about staying here, working full-time with the company. College first, I said firmly. The business will still be here when you graduate, but you need to experience life outside of what I've built for you. You need to meet people who don't know your history, who don't know our story. You need to find out who Tyler Hill is when he's not Keith Hill's son. What if I discover I'm not as strong as I think I am? Then you'll get stronger. What happened to our family taught me that you can't control what other people do to you, but you can always control how you respond. Strength isn't about avoiding challenges. It's about facing them and choosing to build something better from whatever remains. Tyler nodded, then asked the question I'd been expecting for years. Do you think Mom loved me? I think she loved the idea of you. I think she loved having a child, being a mother, being part of a family. But when it came time to choose between her comfort and your well-being, she chose herself. That's not love, Tyler. That's selfishness. Do you think she regretted it? At the end, I thought about Detective Cox's call, about Harmony's final note expressing regret about leaving her son. I think she regretted the consequences of her choices. But I don't think she truly understood the depth of what she'd done until it was too late to fix it. I'm glad you protected me from her. So am I. As Tyler prepared to leave for college, I realized that my greatest achievement wasn't the business empire I'd built or the revenge I'd exacted on those who betrayed me. It was the young man sitting beside me. Confident, thoughtful, principled, ready to build his own life while carrying forward the best of what I taught him. Harmony had tried to steal our future. Instead, she'd forced me to build a better one than I'd ever imagined possible. The boy she tried to take from me had become a man who understood loyalty, integrity, and the true meaning of family. He would build his own life, make his own choices, face his own challenges. But he would do so with the foundation I provided. A foundation built not on trust alone, but on strength, wisdom, and the unwavering commitment to protect what matters most. That was Keith Hill's true legacy. Not the business empire or the personal vindication, but the son who would carry forward the best of what I'd learned while leaving behind the hardest parts of who I'd been forced to become. As I watched Tyler pack for college, I realized that the scared, betrayed husband who discovered his wife's affair in an empty house had been transformed into something far more valuable. A father who'd built something unbreakable from the ruins of betrayal. The house that had held secrets had become the foundation for a legacy of strength, wisdom, and uncompromising love. And that was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.